Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory.
We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. If you desire to integrate this learning practically and supportively into your life, then Soul-Driven Motherhood is your space to go deeper. Head on over to nourishingthemother.com.au or follow any of the links on our socials for Soul-Driven Motherhood.
We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we're so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we have a very special podcast where we are interviewing the very beautiful Bonnie Bliss, who is a somatic sexologist, pelvic wellness specialist, speaker and writer. And she is here to kick off our series that we are doing for the next month, which is all about body love and coming back to the deliciousness of your flesh. So we have the delicious Bonnie Bliss here. We would love for you to say hello before we just introduce you with your bio so everyone has context on where you're from.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm joining you from Melbourne today.
Beautiful.
So beautiful. So before we do that, we'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner, drop in your email address, and once every so often we send you out the links for everything that your heart desires to dive deeper into, what we're at and where we're at, and you can pick and choose. We'd love to dive deeper. So nourishingthemother.com.au.
So let's give everybody a little bit of a background on Bonnie. So Bonnie is a somatic sexologist, pleasure expert, and women's embodiment teacher based in Australia. She's obsessed with the power of pleasure when it comes to building resilience, feeling more confident in ourselves, enjoying our bodies, and having more fulfilling intimate experiences. She spent years feeling totally numb and disconnected from her body, thinking she was broken. At 25, she discovered that pleasure was a learnable skill and she wasn't stuck having boring sex forever. Hallelujah. Since then, she's taught thousands of people all over the world in adult sex education, embodiment, sexual wellness, and pleasure. Her main project is a 3-month program for women called Yoni Club, supporting you to release patterns of shame and numbness, expand your pleasure potential, and come home to your body. That's delicious, doesn't it?
So what I just wanted to add to that was part of your about page, Bonnie, before we just ask you on, how you came to get here, which is a paragraph that says, I feel a deep sense of care and love for my body, and I feel empowered to communicate if something doesn't feel right to me. Shame doesn't get me like it used to, and I know how to use embodiment practices to support self-inquiry, access to pleasure, build sensitivity, and process my emotions to get myself out of feeling stuck. How did you come to getting there?
Well, yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. I like I says in my bio, I was numb and disconnected for many, many years. The whole kind of maybe first 7 years or so that I was having sex, I didn't know what all the fuss was about. I was like, why are people even into this? I don't get it. Mm-hmm. I was, really not feeling a lot in my life generally. I didn't have access to a lot of pleasure. My idea of orgasm was just like 2 minutes with a vibrator, done, finished, feeling kind of drained and exhausted afterwards. And I actually, when I was 25, I met a new partner who introduced me to this whole other way of living and way of approaching pleasure, and took me a few years to kind of settle into it and start really exploring it. But I think one of the turning points was actually my first time seeing a practitioner for a yoni massage. And it's a bit controversial because it's a modality that There are a lot of great people who are trained in these modalities, and I've run a practitioner training, and there's a lot of people I've trained all over the place who I fully respect. But there's also a lot of kind of subpar trainings, or a lot of people who have no training who are just doing that kind of thing. And I don't necessarily recommend it to everyone for that reason. But my personal experience, I was very lucky. I was able to see someone who really knew what they were doing and could hold a very safe space for me. And when she was kind of guiding me through my internal pelvic space that, you know, I'd never really connected with before outside of like penetrative sex, I remember feeling this like, holy shit, that's all inside me, all of these sensations and all of that energy and all of that aliveness. And, you know, I didn't have an orgasm. It wasn't about that. It was more like this expansive, like waves of aliveness and pleasure, and like this sense of almost like coming home to my body, or like feeling myself in a way I never had. And from there, I kind of realized, like, why do we not know more about this? Like, why is this not taught? And that kind of sent me on this whole journey of exploration and training and practice. And that's kind of where I got into, that was kind of my portal into the work that I do now. And over time, like it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's not, you can't just snap your fingers and go from feeling really numb and out of your body and disconnected to like really deliciously alive and connected to pleasure. But I've kind of developed a method and a pathway for that to work over time based on my own experience and exploration. And what I found is that, pleasure is absolutely a learnable skill. It's not, I think a lot of the time in our culture, we think that we're stuck with the pleasure we currently experience. We kind of go like, this is how I orgasm, or this is what I feel when I have sex, or this is how I masturbate. And that's just how it is. And what I've learned over the years is that doesn't need to be how it is. There is always more and there is always deeper, but it's a process of like unlearning some of the things that are getting us stuck, and then rewiring or repatterning our bodies and our nervous systems to access more aliveness and sensitivity and pleasure.
I really love that you said it takes time, because I think that's often not a conversation that is around, even in the self-help world, of which, you know, we're all part of and choose to participate in, is do this course and there's a level of you're fixed, versus it's more like a continuous wave or a continuous cycle of, whoa, expansion, and then holy shit, I've lost it. And I just wondered, as I heard you speaking there, could you speak to the woman on that? Because that I see is quite disheartening for a lot of women, is they experience that, oh my gosh. And then it's almost like there's the counterbalancing contraction of, oh my God, it's gone, I've gone backwards. Do you see that? And how do you be with the women in that space?
Yeah, it's absolutely like that, and that's definitely been part of my own journey. Like with every big expansion is a corresponding contraction, and that's just kind of how it goes. And I think what's important is that we need to see our pleasure and our relationship with our body and our relationship with intimacy with others and our relationship to self-pleasure as an ongoing, ever-evolving journey, in the same way that obviously many, you know, of the women listening will be mothers, in the same way that motherhood is an ongoing, ever-evolving journey. You know, you don't hit a wall and go, oh, well, I failed at this today. It's like, well, this was a little bit tricky and now I'm going to try to do it this way next time. And, you know, it's an ongoing journey. And the problem is that we've basically been sold this idea that pleasure and sexuality is a quick fix, that you just go to you buy a sex toy, or you do a thing, or you have to, your partner needs to stimulate you differently, or you've just got to go harder and faster, or you just get these techniques and you do the thing and that's how it works. And we all know that on a deeper level that that's not true. And we don't see other things in our, like, you know, that with motherhood, it's not done. You don't get motherhood done, right? It's an ever evolving, ongoing journey. And, you know, it's the same thing as long as we have a body and as long as we are relating intimately with ourselves or others, that will be an ongoing, ever evolving journey with its own ups and downs. And we need to see it in that way and not expect the quick fix and not turn it into like a commodity, you know, like I have this, something I talk about a bit in my work is like people get really into what I'm calling vaginal consumerism. It's this like,
that's a great
right, like I've just got to buy all this stuff from my vagina. Like, oh, I've got a jade egg, I got a wand, I bought all the things. So like, why isn't it working? And I'm like, oh, it's not about buying the things. It's about creating the relationship over time, right?
It's a very masculine kind of approach of like getting it done and fixing and having a mission and an outcome. And
exactly.
But of course, that's how we're programmed, right? I was thinking, talking about like, you know, the Dolly magazine that we looked at when we were 10 that talked about, you know, oral sex or, you know, whatever it was always, you know, the 5 tips to and
make him come. Yeah. Right? Totally.
And then the internalized shame that happens when you either fall short of their pleasure or your own, or even like not thinking about your own, and therefore the contraction that comes, which I guess is maybe what you were talking about with your own numbness in your 20s, was, well, why would I go there? Because there's nothing there for me.
Yeah, exactly. What's the point?
What's the point?
Can I just ask you, Bonnie, what does it mean to be a somatic sexologist?
So that means that I teach people about sexuality through their relationship with their own body. So I'm not university educated. My background is not academic. I have done many, 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 many different trainings in embodied sexuality and internal pelvic body work and, you know, somatic body-based approaches to sexuality and embodiment generally, and embodiment teacher trainings and that kind of thing. But my kind of focus and area of interest is on teaching through the relationship with the body rather than just teaching concepts or ideas. What I found, in some ways, my work's a little controversial because it does go against some of the kind of commonly held beliefs around sexuality. And I think that a lot of the traditional approaches, for example, you may have heard the statistic that 80% of women can't experience orgasm through penetrative sex. And so they need to just focus on the clitoris. Have you heard that one?
Yes, I've heard that one.
Yeah. So that's the one that's kind of spouted most commonly. And what I know is that was research. Basically, they just surveyed a bunch of women and said, how do you currently experience orgasm? And 80% of them said, I tend to rely on the clitoris. And then the statistic that was taken from that and has been like bastardized in a million different ways is that they can't experience other kinds of orgasm. And my whole approach is that pleasure is a learnable skill. And so it's the same way as if you would say to someone, you know, I can't ride a bike, but if you have an able body and a sense of balance, you could learn to ride a bike, right? It's a skill, you know? So
how many women stop at that belief?
Exactly.
You know, the research says this.
Right. And I thought that for years. I read all the articles. I was like, right, well, I must just be in that 20% because I rely on the clitoris for orgasm. But what I didn't realize was that I had wired my clitoris for orgasm through only focusing on it for a decade and never exploring anything else. And then through penetrative sex, having experiences that were dishonoring my body, having sex when I was like really drunk and couldn't say no, or overriding my boundaries and having sex because my partner at the time wanted to, or doing it because I wanted to impress him or for his pleasure, or doing it because I, on some level, felt that I was unworthy or undeserving and I needed to like validate myself by performing and being good in bed, you know, and all of that kind of contributed to the internal numbness. But my belief is that over time we can sensitize that area to be more available to pleasure and orgasmic states and even peak orgasm. So it's not as static as we're led to believe, like, oh, well, you're just stuck here, so just focus on the clit. You know, that's not how it really works.
What does it mean when you said I essentially trained my clitoris for 10 years?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. When I first started masturbating, my very first orgasm, which I talk about a bit, is quite funny. I was on a bicycle. I grew up on a farm and I was like riding my bike one day and I was riding down this like bumpy dirt road and I had no hands on the handlebars and just like, whee. And then suddenly I realized it just felt like really, 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 really good in my kind of groin area. And I didn't know why or what it was. I was probably 14 or something. And I just became obsessed with like riding my bike down that one particular hill. And I did it like every day for months, you know, I'd just keep going. And I'd like eventually, you know, push my bike home like totally exhausted. And my mum would be like, wow, you're really into bike riding lately. Like like red in the face. Like,
oh
yes,
my God.
just so good, really loving it. And then we moved into town. We moved like from the farm, we moved into like a house in town on a regular road, which wasn't bumpy. But it was still on a hill. So I tried to do the thing with the bike, and I crashed into the back of a parked car twice before I was like, okay, I need to find another way to have orgasms, right? But like I was kind of a late bloomer. I hadn't discovered boys or anything at that point. So that's when I became very close friends with my electric toothbrush. And that was my thing for many years, like from, probably 16 to like halfway through my 18th year. That was like the only way that I related to my body. And I would just get the toothbrush, jam it onto my clit as hard as I could, turn it on, and just like, and like contract my whole body and tense everything and contract and squeeze and tense and tense and tense and tense and hold everything, and then have a explosive orgasm. And that was literally just that was my wiring, right? That was just like focusing on that. It's the same way if you imagine if you were born with two normal functional hands, and one hand you did everything with, and you picked things up and you learnt to write and draw and lift things and move stuff and paint and everything, and the other hand you never used. What would that hand be like, the one that you never used? It'd be like pretty numb and like not very functioning. I feel like it's like that for a lot of us with our pleasure. It's like when we just wire it to one particular little zone. Of course, the clitoris is amazing and I love it and has so many nerve endings and it's awesome. But if we only focus on it and not the rest of the pelvis, I'm particularly obsessed with cervical pleasure personally, but there's lots of pleasure everywhere that's available. But also the other thing that I'm really into that I think isn't talked about enough is like whole body pleasure, like your whole body is a sexual and sensual organ, and we can experience pleasure in our day, in our life, in a way that's not even sexual, that can still feel like amazing. And like I've experienced pleasure from just like looking at a tree that's been like more profound than a lot of the orgasms I've had in my life,
Yeah, totally. Can I ask you or just to extrapolate out what it means when you say orgasms that left you exhausted?
Yeah, so for me, the way that I was having clitoral orgasms with the electric toothbrush or later with a vibrator, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with using vibrators, but the way that I was using them was very like I just focus on that one place and I contract and squeeze and tense everything to like squeeze the orgasm out. And in that experience, I wasn't connected to my body, right? Like I was just so focused on the goal, just trying to make the thing happen, that I wasn't feeling myself. I wasn't enjoying the journey. I wasn't like, oh, this is really lovely and I feel good. It was just like, got to squeeze out the orgasm. And for me, that kind of orgasm afterwards, I feel drained, I feel flat, I feel exhausted. It feels almost disappointing. It's like there's that build up, and then and then it's like, afterwards I disconnect a bit. And if I have that kind of orgasm with a partner, I shut down emotionally towards them. There's this feeling of like, I'm done, get over there, leave me alone. So it's almost like this, it's very contraction based, and it's almost like transactional, like I've got to get my orgasm and now I've had the thing for 3 seconds and now I'm like disconnected from myself. And I want more than that when it comes to pleasure. That's not ultimately fulfilling me.
What does it mean to have pleasure through your whole pelvis?
Well, the whole pelvic floor and different parts of the pelvis can be super pleasurable, right? Or can have a sense of aliveness and well-being there. And the tricky thing is that a lot of us, in the way that we live, in the culture we live in, we can be quite disconnected from the pelvis. Like we're sitting down a lot, which our bodies are not designed to do. We're not moving them in the way that they're designed to do. We, technically, like our bodies are designed to squat when we use the toilet, right? And to move in very different ways, the way that our bodies have evolved. So what that means is that for many of us, we have this kind of chronic pelvic tension patterns that are just there ongoingly because of our lifestyle, because of stress, because of like low grade stress or anxiety or, busyness. and because of the way that we move and sit and exist in the world. And that contributes to these tension patterns that block blood flow. And when blood flow is blocked, that also blocks sensitivity, which blocks pleasure, which blocks orgasm. So when we, a lot of what the work that I teach in my course is like using a glass wand. I mean, there's lots of ways you can, shift your relationship with your pelvis, and some of them don't need to be internal, but they can just be like moving your pelvis, right? Like doing hip circles and wiggling it and moving with a focus on your pelvis just to connect with it more. And that's going to bring more blood flow. But something I teach really specifically is like using a wand internally to like massage the pelvic floor and the G spot and the A spot and the cervix and these like potential pleasure zones, and just to like bring more blood flow and sensitivity, but also to kind of train those areas to experience more pleasure and aliveness as well.
It's really beautiful. I know that we're totally off topic because what we wanted to talk about was body image in the bedroom. A very interesting segue.
Yes.
I have one more question for you before we actually do get to our topic at hand. Is that all right?
Yes.
So I have a vaginal prolapse that occurred from my 4th pregnancy. And I know that there's I wouldn't say large, but I know that there's a collection of women who listen to this podcast who also have prolapses of various sorts, and it is still greatly shrouded in shame and secrecy, and nobody talks about it or wants to. There's a huge amount of stigma of, well, now is my pussy ugly? Can I even love it again? What does it mean? I don't know. I'm still, as you talk about with the journey of the body, I will, I think, forever be on a journey with my vagina. And prolapse for me now is very much part of that journey. So I just wondered if you had much experience in that area, what it meant when you're talking about whole pelvis pleasure, or I don't know, just anything that you had on that.
Yeah. So obviously prolapse is really common after birth, and prolapse can be, they talk about it as like pelvic organ prolapse, but it can be obviously the cervix, but also the bladder can prolapse and the rectum can prolapse. And there's a lot of different schools of thought around what can be done about it. In Australia, we've been through a really huge process with, I don't know if you know about the pelvic mesh implants and the Johnson & Johnson, and how that ended up being the most massive, terrible disaster for women. And a lot of women kind of trusted their medical professionals and got those pelvic mesh implants because of their prolapse, and then later found out that actually that was incorrect and it shouldn't have even been released, and they can't ever get that mesh removed. And a lot of those women are in intense, chronic, ongoing pain that can never be shifted. And there have been lawsuits, and a lot of them have been paid out. But I don't think any amount of money is worth being in infinite chronic pain for the rest of your life. And so I can't be seen to be giving medical advice.
No, sorry, I wasn't after that. More just from the context of the work with the pelvis,
totally,
and image, and
no, for sure. But I'm just saying, I do get angry when I hear about those kind of medical approaches, because it's obviously not okay. And my interest in this is approaching it more from that body-based perspective of relating with it, and part of that is going to be being with the my body doesn't function in the way that it used to, and I have emotions about that, and that's okay, and this is the reality of what's happening right now, and then creating a relationship with it as it is right now. And part of that is that there's lots of things you can do around pelvic movement and awareness. The internal work I found is really helpful for that. Doing your own gentle internal wand work and exploration. And even, have you heard of Arvigo therapy?
No, I haven't heard.
It's Mayan abdominal massage. It's a gentle external pelvic massage that can support the ligaments supporting the uterus. It can help them to kind of come into a bit more balance, especially after birth, or if things are not in their optimal position. It kind of works on supporting the uterus to find its optimal happy position. And and that can be quite helpful with prolapse as well.
What did you say it was called again?
It's got two names, so Mayan abdominal therapy or Arvigo therapy, ARVIGO.
Thank you.
Now, there's practitioners all over the place. It's quite amazing. The other thing that has really helped with prolapse for a lot of people is urogenital osteopathy. And there's an osteo who I send a lot of people to who I actually met. I did a urogenital osteo training. I'm not an osteopath, but I was allowed to do this, little section of osteo training with internal pelvic body work for like really specific pelvic issues. And what I know is people who are proper osteos who are trained in that are amazing with prolapse. But a lot of osteos don't do internal work. So, yeah.
Thank you. They're such beautiful recommendations. I really appreciate that.
No worries.
So where I want to take the conversation now is body image in the bedroom. So there's this beautiful post of yours. I'll show you. We're streaming into Salt of Motherhood, so you'll see that's that photo. So it's a photo of a woman pulling down her undies, and you can see her tiger stripes or stretch marks, and they're covered in what looks like glitter. So I'm just going to hang on, I wanted to read. Where did it go? This is Bonnie writing. There have been times I've been so damn scared of being seen naked that I've avoided intimacy completely, or still gone through it, but from a place of being pretty shut down and disconnected. I'm pretty passionate about unraveling what gets in the way of women having fulfilling intimacy. And that's where we really wanted to take that conversation is, what does it mean to you to be with body image in the bedroom, particularly in the face of, which is beautiful coming off the talk of our prolapse conversation, your body has changed. It's different to the way that you've ever known it to be before, and doesn't fit a cultural norm or esteemed version of beauty that has women often shaming and shutting down, versus in the intimacy and sexuality space, and particularly what we're here to talk to you about is the embodied space of coming back home to your body and finding pleasure as an opening, versus that as an experience of being seen and welcomed and loving.
Yeah, body image in the bedroom has been something I've navigated quite a lot. I'm not a mother, but my body has changed a lot over the years. I recently turned 37, so I'm noticing, age is a thing. Like, I am actually I think I've just reached that point where I'm like, I am getting older. Like, my body is aging. Like, I don't know how I didn't quite connect the dots before, but I've reached that point where I'm like, age is legitimately a thing, and I'm noticing it. And my body's also changed. My weight tends to fluctuate quite a lot due to stress levels and different health issues and stuff I'm navigating. And I really relate to that. This is very different to how it used to be. And I know that's, I work with a lot of mothers, and I know that's a big thing. It's my body is profoundly different to how it used to be, and it may not ever be how it used to be again. And there are quite a few different ways of like unpacking that and navigating it. I think for me, I'm really interested in this holistic approach to things. It's not like, well, here's your quick fix. It's like, okay, let's zoom out and look at that from 7 different angles and see what's really happening. And I think one of the things that kind of the foundational things that can't be ignored is that we live in a culture that tells us how our bodies are supposed to look. And that tells us that anything that doesn't fit into that is wrong, bad, ugly, not enough. And a lot of that comes from, patriarchal standards of women's bodies, right? I'm going to tell you an example of when I was younger. So I wasn't raised, my parents divorced when I was young, and I would see my father on school holidays. And I remember one time I hadn't seen him for a few months. I went to see him for the school holidays. I got out of the car and I went to give him a hug. And at that point, I was probably 15 or 16. I was not a particularly large teenager, had a little bit of puppy fat, as you do. And, I got out of the car and went to give him a hug, and he kind of pulled me back from his body and he looked me up and down and he said, "You know what, Bonnie?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "You're getting fat." And you know what? And I said, "What, Dad?" And he said, "Men don't like fat women." And it was like, you know, and I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. And I just went inside, you know, but like that really did hit me. And I really see, and that's just, you know, I mean, my dad was also part of that larger culture, right? So I'm not kind of demonizing him. It's just that's a really specific example I have of that. And so in my 20s, you know, going into like having an active sex life, I was like, my body is for men's pleasure. My sexuality is for men. What I do in bed is for men. I need to perform. I need to look the right way. And then, you know, I mean, I'm 37 now, so I didn't grow up with the porn that like a lot of younger people have been exposed to these days. But I know now like the impact of porn is huge. And that is, again, all about performance and again, all about an aesthetic, right? It's like we're looking at people have sex from the outside. And those people genuinely don't love each other. They're not in a relationship. They're doing it for performance. So neither of them are probably feeling connected or really intimate or really in the pleasure, right? Occasionally that can happen where people are, you know, porn actors or actresses are like actually experiencing genuine pleasure, but a lot of the time they're not. It's an act, and it's for the benefit of someone watching. And then the industry has made it so that there's more and more intense experiences of porn that people keep getting subjected to because we're more and more disconnected and desensitized, and we need to watch more and more really screwed up, dodgy things to kind of get that same rush of dopamine. So all of that has created this very perfect storm around performance, around sex being for, you know, for heterosexual people, sex being for the man's benefit, or sex being about what it looks like. And my kind of area of interest is like bringing it back to sex being about how we feel in ourselves, in our own bodies, in the intimacy with someone we care about, in the connection. And when we are externalizing, like if, you know, I can remember periods when I was at the peak of my like fear and anxiety and like total shutdown around my body image. I remember periods of just being like, I can't let him see me naked. He's going to see me from that angle. I can't do that position. He's going to, oh my God, what does my belly look like? Like just like panic in the bedroom, like utter panic. And it was interesting because, you know, like being with someone who was completely devotional and loving and honoring and respectful of my body and loved my body how it was with all of its squishy shapes and whatever, and was just like super happy to be having sex with me. But I was just in that like panic. And part of it was related to, you know, there was one relationship I've been in where that partner was really critical of my body, and that created almost like a trauma around body image in the bedroom. I remember him saying like, I'm less attracted to you since you've gained weight, and I just, you know, don't really want to have sex with you. And that was like really confronting for me. But even, you know, just noticing the patterns going on in my own head was really confronting, and it really blocked me from all pleasure because I was obsessing over what it looked like from the outside. So my kind of focus these days is like just feeling my own pleasure and feeling the intimacy and the connection with the person that I love. And that has been the thing that massively healed my body image. You know, it's noticing the patterns that are there, noticing the stories, but having the tools to come back to your body and back to your pleasure and back to the connection, because that's actually what's sexy, you know? And ultimately, like, I don't want to be with someone who thinks that sexy is about how I look or the positions I can talk my body into. Like that, I just don't want to relate with someone like that, you know? If someone thinks that that's the definition of what sexy is or what a turn on is or what intimacy is, I'm not into that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's so many questions I want to ask you about. I'm going to start with, so Bonnie back then, who is in that internal panic, which in many ways is disparate from, in inverted commas, the reality of her partner and his internal world. I think there's many of us that can relate to being exactly in that dynamic. What is it that she needed to know and hear that if you could go back as the ghost of Christmas past or as the mentor or whatever, that you would like to implant into her or show her to move through?
I think for me, the big theme has always been around worthiness. You know, like there is nothing you need to do to be worthy or deserving of feeling good. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to do a certain thing, perform in a certain way, look a certain way, conform to some kind of society's ideal of what you should be or do or look like in order to be worthy of feeling good, in order to be worthy of delicious intimacy, in order to be worthy of being loved, you know? So much of my life, I thought I needed to do all of these things to feel worthy of existing. And I read a term for this the other day, internalized capitalism. You know, the idea that you should feel guilty for resting, you need to hustle at all costs, you need to get it all done, you have to do everything and then you can rest. Your worthiness is directly dependent on your production, your output. You know, that's a symptom of the culture we live in, and I'm not really here for it.
How do you think you back then, or women who find themselves in that place, can work on their sense of worthiness? Because we totally and utterly support and agree with what you're saying, but I also think that can feel quite etheric for women that are not there. They're like, but I don't feel worthy. Like, I don't even know how to. What do you think the steps are to that?
Yeah, so I think just the awareness that that's where you're at is super important. Just like right now, I feel really unworthy and I feel like I'm not sure how I would shift that. You know, just really acknowledging where you are, I think, is foundational to moving anywhere, because when we don't allow ourselves to be where we are, then we can't really shift anything. You know, so just accept it's okay that you are where you are. You are where you are because of the experiences you've had and the world you live in and the things that have happened and the stories you've believed. And that's all very normal and it's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that, because also, like, we kind of want to work on removing the shame. And a lot of the time we shame ourselves for things that are really normal or believing things that everyone has told us forever, you know? So it's like, it's normal that we believe that. It's normal that we feel this way given the world we live in. So accepting where you are. And then for me, this is where pleasure comes in. And this is why I'm so obsessed with pleasure, because we're not trying to connect with a sense of worthiness from like external sources, from like getting it from someone else or getting it from society or getting it from, you know, some concept that's a bit abstract. It's feeling it from the inside. And when I connect with a sense of aliveness in my own body, or when I move my body and feel good, when like something that I do sometimes, because worthiness is like kind of one of my larger themes that comes up, when I notice that I feel a bit unworthy or I want to feel more of that like deserving and openness to you know, enjoy my life, I'll move my body with a sense of like inviting in worthiness. You know, like how does my body want to move if I was like welcoming in, I deserve to feel good, I deserve good things, like how can I, you know, welcome that in through my body and kind of let my body be an instrument of worthiness in a way. But the main foundation of that is just bringing pleasure into your world, pleasure in your day, pleasure in how you move your body, pleasure in how you engage with your senses, pleasure in how you open to joy from just, you know, witnessing your children play or being with your family or your loved ones, like pleasure, sensual pleasure, pleasure from touching your body, pleasure from moving your body, and then also pleasure from your connection with your sexuality or your self-pleasure or your intimacy with a partner, if you're open for that. But that part of it, you know, the sexual intimacy, self-pleasure part is only one part of this kind of infinite ocean of pleasure that we can tap into in our days in a way that it's not like another thing to do, right? It's just something that brings us little sparks of aliveness or joy as we already go through our day.
So for the woman, like you had photographed in that beautiful image of, you know, she's staying there, she has the tiger stripes of motherhood, her breasts are different, who knows, and her partner sees her as sexy and beautiful, but she doesn't. How do you what would be your advice for a woman starting at that place of I want to see myself the way that he sees me, but I can't.
Yeah. So probably the main practice, like for me, the part of my body that I have most judged is absolutely my belly. And I've done a lot of work on reclaiming that part of me through my awareness, through my connection with it, and through my touch. So what I really recommend is, because we'll usually have, it's certain parts of our bodies that we judge, right? Sometimes it's the whole thing, but a lot of the time we can really kind of zoom in and be like, you know what, I just really struggle with like my belly and my butt or whatever it is. So connecting with those parts of you especially, and giving them a lot of loving attention. And, you know, like I touch my belly a lot these days. Like I'm touching it right now. I touch it when I touch it when I'm lying in bed. I was, watching Netflix last night, and I just had my like hands tucked into my tights, and I was just like holding my belly, you know, as a comfort thing, but also as a connection thing, and as a reminder to not abandon that part of my body. Because if I'm going to abandon any part of my body, it will be my belly, you know? So just like keeping that connection there through my touch, through my awareness, sometimes through my breath, just like breathing into my belly and feeling like this is part of my body. It actually feels nice to breathe into it. When I touch it, I can feel it's like it's kind of soft and squishy, and it feels enjoyable to touch. And if I'm not making up a story that there's something wrong with it, like right now, right, I can touch my belly and I can focus on the softness and like how nice it feels on my hands to touch. But as I do that, I might also notice there's a story that comes in that says your belly's too big, you need to lose weight, you know? So I can notice that story and be like, cool, there's a story there, but come back to how does it feel right now? What are the sensations, you know? How does it feel to touch? Because no one ever gained any deeper, longer term benefit from shaming and judging their body. You know, it's not, sometimes we think we need to like shame our bodies into submission, or if we judge ourselves enough, then it'll help us to like treat our bodies better. And that's ultimately not how it works. So reminding yourself of that and coming back to the, like, it's okay that judging or shaming side of myself is there. It's very normal. But what can I do to connect now and feel now what this part of me feels like?
It's really beautiful. Thank you. I just had another question that you touched on before for the partner that's like, you know, babe, I'm not attracted to you anymore. That situation is like not working for me. And I totally resonate with what you're saying, which is like, I would not choose to be with a partner who that has that view of sexuality or relationship or intimacy totally. But what if you are married to that partner and you've just had a baby with that partner? And you're not ready to say goodbye to that relationship, but you also can't be with that. What would be your advice there?
That's a good one. I think it's really about communication, you know, with sexuality and our bodies and the areas of life that are a bit more taboo or shameful in our culture. Sometimes we think things are just supposed to magically flow, and we don't really have a reference point for talking about it. You know, this is a theme in the whole situation with consent in Australia right now. People are all saying like, oh, consent is just going to ruin the mood. And it's like, you know what? If getting consent ruins the mood, then you were the only person who was in the mood in the first place, you know? It's not. So we need to normalize having these conversations and having the conversations about your body image, about the kind of sex you want to be having or not having, about your relationship to pleasure, about, you know, it's the same as like the sticky conversations about parenting, right? Having different parenting styles and needing to navigate that. And in parenthood, that's something that people are generally or mostly up for having those conversations, because you're kind of confronted with it every day. Like, oh, I want to parent this way and you want to parent that way. How do we, you know, what is going to be a balance for us, or what is going to be best for our child? And I think it's the same thing with a relationship, seeing the relationship as something that needs ongoing nurturing and care and respect. And that's going to need to have, you know, conversations about it. And some of those conversations might be hard. It might be hard to say, you know what, babe, like I'm really struggling with body image right now, and I'm really it's really debilitating. And I notice that I'm shaming myself a lot, and I'm feeling like I'm a bad person, and it's making me feel like sometimes I don't want to exist. This is how it's been for me sometimes, right? Just like I'm believing that how my body looks makes me fundamentally unworthy, and that is and that's not a fact. That's not true. But it's a story I'm holding, and it's really impacting me. Can we talk about it and find ways to help me to feel safe in our relating? Because I know that, you have these opinions about it, but I also need to feel safe. And you judging or shaming my body isn't going to help me to treat my body better, feel safer in my body, or feel more open to intimacy with you. So, let's find a way forward. Part of that can also be education. Like I follow a lot of people on Instagram who share a lot of body positivity stuff, and just realizing the extent to which we have been brainwashed by the media about what our bodies should look like, and about, we're not allowed to age, we're not allowed to have our bodies change after birth, you need to lose the baby weight straight away, all of that stuff, just noticing the conditioning around it, and maybe even introducing that concept to a partner and saying, hey, here's some research about this, or here's an article, or would you be open to have a conversation about this? Or, and this is probably a larger thing, going to therapy together. If you feel like there's something really glitchy in your relationship where you're regularly feeling a bit emotionally unsafe or not cared for or not comfortable, I absolutely recommend like really good couples therapy. I think there's no shame in therapy. I think there are people who are trained to support us to work through these things and create a safe space. And when it's something that is quite triggering, like it can be for body image, and I know it has been for me, it's really good to just have someone there to support you to navigate it, because I've had that stuff come up with a partner where I've just kind of been like, you hate me because my body looks this way, or you want to end the relationship because my body looks this way. And that wasn't the reality, that was a story that I made up, but I was so in it that I couldn't see anything else. And that was like really hard to then have a healthy conversation about it, But being able to go to a therapist who can help you kind of unpack things, that can really make a difference.
Thank you. It's such a beautiful response. Really appreciate that. So before we move into our 3 quick fire questions, is there anything you want to touch on, Bridgie?
Oh, there's just so much there. I've got a few notes, but pretty much covered it all, actually. A lot of it, that piece around the narrative too, I thought was beautiful, because recognizing how big that shame narrative can be, and then the practice of being in the body to change it, like rather than kind of like trying to counteract it with your mind again, to actually come back to putting your own hands on your body. Like it seems like it's such a simple thing, but actually how often do we forget to do that? Like to forget to actually have our hands on our body.
Yeah, we always want to think our way out of our problems, right? It's like that. I think it's like that old Einstein quote that's like, the problem can't be solved at the level of thinking that created it. It's like you can't effort your way into connection with yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we do. Sorry, Julie, go.
No, I was going to say, did you have anything else, Bridge? Because then I just wanted to check in if Bonnie had anything before we wrap up today that you just wanted to leave our listeners with.
No, Bonnie, what do you have anything else?
I think just the main message that I generally have around all of this is that you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You can create a deeper connection with your body and your pleasure and your intimacy, but you need to look at it in the same way that you look at an ongoing journey of parenting or an ongoing journey of a relationship. It is a relationship. Your relationship with yourself is a relationship. And when we nurture it as a relationship over time, sure, we'll have those ups and downs and those expansions and contractions, but it can bring us such a deep, nourishing connection with ourselves that can profoundly shift how we show up in the world, how we love, how we parent, how we care for people in our lives, how creative we are with our work, and expand our capacity to be a more full version of ourselves. Like I think sometimes we see pleasure as like it's just a thing I need to deal with, and it's another thing for my to-do list that I'm just going to put it in that box over there and ignore it because I've got all the stuff to do and I'm really stressed. But when we actually bring pleasure into our lives in really simple ways that don't need to take lots of time away from what we're doing, then we have more energy for our kids. We're more focused. We're more present with ourselves. We feel like we're living our lives rather than just being on autopilot. And that's what I think is really valuable. And it's not really spoken about enough with pleasure. Like, it's not a separate little thing that you need to deal with. It's like, it can be, you can live your life in a way that integrates pleasure even when you're super stressed and you have a lot on.
Really beautiful reminder. I love that. So you're coming into Soul Driven Motherhood with our community in the release week of this podcast. So on the 13th of May, you're coming in to do a workshop in there on body image in the bedroom. So if you're in Soul Driven Motherhood, you can absolutely look forward to that. It'll be at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. If you're not in Soul Driven Motherhood and you would love to be part of this conversation, then please head over to nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourish the Mother on Facebook or Instagram, and you will be able to find a very quick link to jump into Soul Driven Motherhood and catch Bonnie Bliss on Thursday, the 13th of May at 2 p.m. So, Bonnie, we usually, with every podcast interview that we have 3 quick fire questions that we ask because they're deeply insightful and often really beautiful, just conversations. So are you okay if we hit off with those?
Sure.
So I'll do first on Bridgie, then do you want to take off from there?
Sure, yeah.
So the first question we have is that we're big on our wounds being experiences that have been deep or hard for us to traverse in our lifetime, but we've consequently gone through a cycle of healing or insight and integration with, and from the wound we've created some wisdom which we now deeply love or use in our life. And so we're wondering, is there a moment in your life that you would feel open to sharing that you yourself have experienced a wound and what that was, and that it's turned into wisdom and what that is, and what the journey was in between?
Yeah, so there was a relationship that I was in where I kind of jumped into that relationship because I made it about him. I made everything I was feeling about him. I kind of outsourced my pleasure to him. I decided that all the good, juicy, amazing things I was feeling at the beginning of the relationship were because of him. And I kind of made that the driving force and decided that we are meant to be together and this is the ultimate partnership. But and that relationship inevitably ended and was not the right thing for me, and was very devastating and full on, because I had kind of decided that this was the ultimate partner for me because of how I felt. And the thing that the wisdom I gained from that was that I don't need to outsource my pleasure to someone else, and my connection with myself and all of that joy and magic and beautiful things that we can feel in relationship. Sure, it's co-created and there are always two people involved in that, but I was the one that was creating that as well, and that it was possible for me to connect with that energy and create that with someone else, and not make someone else responsible for it and kind of, jump into that whole like sunshine and rainbows, like this is the ultimate fairyland kind of situation because of, me feeling good in it. So realizing that I can create intimacy in different ways. And does that make sense?
Yeah.
That really does. Thank you.
Now, we also love to find out from you and from all of our special guests the book that you would, if you could, have everyone read in their lifetime, or that have been most influential to you that you would love to gift.
Yeah, I think one book, just, because all of my work is with women, so I think about books for women. The one book that I recommend a lot is The Wild Woman's Way by Michaela Boehm, who's a teacher of mine who I've worked really closely with over the last 7 years or so. And she recently released this book maybe 2 years ago. And I'm just like, this book is really great. And it has just a lot of the foundational stuff that I personally work with. But I'm also a fan of, I'm actually at the moment reading Sarah Wilson's book called This One Wild and Precious Life. And that's quite amazing. It's talking about where we are in the world at the moment and how we can live in a way that's more in alignment with what the earth needs, and how we can navigate being in these like really tumultuous times without overriding or avoiding or pretending it's not happening.
Thank you. And if you could have a billboard anywhere on a superhighway, what would it say?
I love that question. There is nothing you need to do in order to be worthy of feeling amazing and enjoying your life.
Oh, that's so good. It's so good. Oh, Bonnie, what a delight it has been to speak to you. You have just an absolutely hypnotic voice and speak with such wisdom that I really feel it in my bones. So thank you. It's really felt like a blessing to traverse so many conversations in here and to have the opportunity to dive deeper with you in soul-driven motherhood, but also through your offerings. So we'd love for you to share where people can connect with you, find you, and join your current offerings.
So my website is bonniebliss.co, and that's Bonnie with an IE, and there you'll find all of my things. And at the moment, my 3-month training Yoni Club is open until the 20th of May. And that is an epic trauma-informed 3-month sexual wellness journey for women, designed to support you to feel confident in your body, to expand your pleasure potential, to release patterns of numbness and shame, and to go on a journey with a whole bunch of incredible women and guest teachers and support. And that's my baby. We've had about 1,500 women through the program in the last 3 years, and it's my absolute joy to share it. And would love you to check it out if you're inspired. But there's a bunch of free offerings as well, always through my website, workshops and trainings and all kinds of juicy things. So check it out.
Thank you. And are you on socials?
I am. So my Instagram is the same as my website, bonniebliss.co. And on Facebook, I have a page, but I don't really post there.
We usually pick a platform, don't we?
Yeah.
So we will make sure we have all of your links in the show notes. So you are more than welcome to scroll into the show notes and connect through there.
Yes. So thank you so much, Bonnie. And yes, remember to nourish women, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
And if you're ready to ask, in what ways can I show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can I mine the wisdom from the experiences of my life and expand into those challenges? Then you're a soul-driven, heart-led mama who's ready for conversations and a community that supports her journey. Come join Soul Driven Motherhood. We'd love to have you.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.